My name is Samantha Collins. I'm 31 years old, and last summer my younger sister Emily destroyed my entire career in a single flick of her wrist. It happened on a blistering Texas afternoon at my parents' house just outside Austin. The air was thick with the smell of barbecue and sunscreen, the pool shimmering under a relentless sun. Music drifted from the patio, cousins laughed over beers, the chatter of plates and glasses rose and fell like background noise. And then, Emily's smile, sweet, sharp, practiced, caught my eye. She was holding my work laptop, the one with months of contracts, campaigns, and passwords, everything I had built with years of exhaustion and grit. At first, I thought it was a joke. She dangled it like a toy, her nails catching the light, until she tilted her wrist, until I saw the silver case slip through her fingers. The splash cut through every conversation. My stomach dropped with it as if my body knew before my brain could register. Gasps rose, then quickly faded back to chatter. My mother frowned not at Emily, but at me. Emily smirked, her voice dripping with mock innocence. Relax, it's just a laptop. But it wasn't just a laptop. It was my name, my reputation, my life. And when I looked into her eyes that day, I realized something cold she wanted me to break. But what they didn't know was that this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. Before I continue, I want to pause for just a moment. Stories like mine aren't easy to tell, and if you've ever felt the sting of betrayal from someone who shares your blood, you know exactly how deep it cuts. So before I take you into the past, the childhood memories, the favoritism, the cracks that were already forming long before that laptop hit the water, do me a favor. Tell me where you're watching from in the comments, and hit like and subscribe if you've ever been betrayed by family. Trust me, you'll want to hear how this plays out. I grew up in a house where silence was louder than thunder. From the street, our home looked like the picture of stability, white shutters, a mailbox painted by my dad one summer, the lawn mowed in neat stripes. But inside, there was always an imbalance, small and visible to outsiders, but heavy to live under. My role was written early, the reliable daughter. The one who folded laundry while the TV droned in the background, who came home with straight A's, who never asked for more than what was given. Emily, 5 years younger, was chaos wrapped in a ribbon. If I was the steady flame of a candle, she was the spark that burned through curtains. She had this ability to stumble into messes and somehow come out praised for the ashes. I remember being 12, the air outside thick with cut grass and bug spray. I sat at the kitchen table, hunched over a math worksheet, pencil smudges staining my hands. Emily padded in barefoot, clutching a doll with tangled hair. "Sam, help your sister," Mom said without looking up from the wine glass she was filling. Emily plopped the doll in front of me, grinning. Its arm dangled by a thread. "Fix it," she ordered. I glanced at my unfinished worksheet. "I'm not sure how." "Just do it, Sam. You're better with your hands." Mom cut in sharp, weary. So I did. Needle thread patience. Emily watched me work, popping grapes into her mouth juice, glistening on her chin. When I handed the doll back, she squealed, hugged it tight, and ran off. "No, thank you. Just gone." I looked up, hoping for acknowledgement. Mom didn't notice. Her attention was on the whine on the radio, humming faintly in the background. That was my childhood rhythm. Me holding it together, Emily celebrated simply for existing. By high school, the imbalance grew sharper. I had spent months writing an essay for a scholarship that could change everything. Late nights hunched at the old desktop in my room, the glow of the screen painting shadows under my eyes, black coffee cooling beside me. Words were my refuge, my way to make sense of chaos. The day before the deadline, I left a printed copy on my desk while I went to the library. When I came back, it was gone. Emily's door was half open. She was 13, then old enough to know better. My essay lay on her desk, my name scratched out hers, scrawled in blue ink. "Emily!" I snapped, my lungs tightening. "Why would you?" She smiled, eyes wide with fake innocence. "It's just practice. Chill out. This isn't practice. This is mine." My hands shook as I snatched the pages back. Mom appeared in the doorway, her eyes landing on me, not on the stolen essay. "Sam, stop making everything dramatic. She admires you. Can't you just let it go?" Let it go. Those 3 words became the chorus of my life. I let it go when Emily wore my sweater and returned it stained with nail polish. I let it go when she borrowed my ID to sneak into a concert. I let it go when she whispered to cousins that I was boring Sam the responsible one. Each cut small enough to dismiss, deep enough to scar. And I didn't know it back then, but those scars would matter later. By the time I graduated, the roles were cemented. I got into college out of state, my ticket to something bigger. Emily got a car from Dad as her congratulations for finishing high school. I drove my second-hand sedan, coughing smoke onto the highway, a lump in my throat, not from sadness, but from something colder, the realization that no matter what I achieved, it would never weigh as much as Emily's smile. Still, I told myself distance would fix it, that 4 years away would create space wide enough to reset the balance. But family has a way of pulling you back into the same old roles the second you step through the door. And I didn't know it then, but the home I left behind was just waiting for me to return, waiting for Emily to sharpen her knives. College should have been my clean break. For the first time, people knew me simply as Samantha, not Emily's older sister, not the responsible one, just me. At the University of Texas, I threw myself into every class, every late-night group project. I worked part-time shifts at a coffee shop near campus, the kind that smelled of burnt espresso and lemon cleaner. Every night, I trudged back to my dorm hair, tangled with steam and coffee grounds, but my pocket heavier with the wages I'd earned myself. I loved it. Independence tasted like caffeine and freedom, but family has a way of tightening its grip just when you think you've loosened it. Thanksgiving break sophomore year. The air was smoky with barbecue pits neighbors drinking beer out of red cups on their porches. I came home glowing with news I'd landed an internship at a PR firm in Austin, a big step toward the career I wanted. I sat down at the dining table, my announcement folded carefully on my tongue. And then Emily walked in. She was 15, dressed in a leather jacket. Dad had just bought her tags, still dangling from the sleeve. She twirled like the living room was a runway. "Check this out," she said, posing. "Dad got it for me." Mom clapped. Dad smiled wide. Everyone's eyes turned to her. I opened my mouth. "I actually have some news, too." "I got Sam past the mashed potatoes," Mom interrupted, still watching Emily. I passed the bowl. My news withered on my lips like steam no one bothered to notice. Later that night, I overheard Emily whispering to our cousin Sam, thinks she's such a big deal now. It's kind of sad. I slipped outside to the porch, the air sharp with cold, and swallowed the words I wanted to scream. Because deep down, I knew she wasn't lying about how our family saw me. To them, Emily sparkled. I was just the light bulb overhead. The pattern never changed. By 23, I was working full-time, the hum of deadlines filling my apartment every night. I had a second-hand couch IKEA shelves that leaned slightly and a laptop that whirred like an old engine. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. One evening, after back-to-back client meetings, I slumped onto the couch blazer, still clinging to my shoulders, when my voicemail blinked red. Mom's voice crackled through the line. "Sam, your sister needs help. She says you're good with computers. Call her." Exhaustion weighed down my bones, but I called anyway. Emily answered, her voice syrupy sweet. "Hey, so I need you to make me a logo for my new business idea. Just something quick, like professional looking." "What business?" I asked. She giggled. "Don't worry about that part. Just make it sleek, you know." "You're good at that." I should have said no. I should have hung up. Instead, I opened my laptop, the glow cutting through my tired eyes, and spent 2 hours creating something modern. I emailed it off. "No, thank you," came back. Weeks later, I found out she'd been using that logo in pitches to friends claiming her mentor sister was backing her. My chest burned, but when I confronted Mom, she brushed it off. "She's young. Let her dream. You can spare a few hours? Spare a few hours. Spare a few dollars. Spare a few pieces of myself." That was always the script. But pieces add up, and I didn't know it then, but one day they'd weigh more than I could carry. The worst moment came at Dad's 50th birthday. The house smelled of brisket and beer laughter bouncing off every wall. I carried in the cake candles glowing. Before I could set it down, Emily clinked her glass. "I have an announcement," she said, voice thick with sugar. "I'm starting a new business. And guess who's backing me?" "My big sister." My hands froze around the cake. Dozens of eyes turned. "That's not true," I said, calm but sharp. Gasps spread. Mom's glare sliced across the table. "Sam, don't embarrass her." "I'm not backing her," I repeated. I never agreed. Emily's face faltered, then reassembled into a pout. I must have misunderstood. My bad. Conversations trickled back, but under the table my fists clenched so hard the fork marks etched into my palm, because I realized something terrifying. She didn't just want my help. She wanted my name. That night I sat in my car in their driveway, headlights cutting across the lawn. My heart slammed against the steering wheel. I whispered into the dark, "How many times am I going to let this happen?" I didn't know it then, but that question was a seed, one that would bloom years later the night Emily let my laptop sink into the pool. I drove home, streetlights streaking past my phone, buzzing with family texts I refused to read. The city swallowed me whole, but I carried the echo of my own whisper looping in my chest like a warning. Next time I won't just let it go. By the time I turned 30, I thought I had finally built a life out of reach from Emily's shadow. I managed a small team at a media company in Austin. My days were a blur of campaign briefs, client calls, and brainstorms under fluorescent lights. My office smelled faintly of printer ink and coffee, and sometimes I'd stay late just to stare out at the skyline from the 22nd floor. The city lights glittered like promises I had carved out for myself. But escape isn't the same as freedom. Emily, at 25, still lived at home. She had no steady job, yet she paraded through life with designer handbags and manicured nails. Every time I scrolled Instagram there, she was rooftop bars, champagne glasses, captions like "Boss moves only." I laughed sometimes bitterly. Other times I wanted to throw my phone against the wall. That Christmas, the house smelled of cinnamon and pine, Dad muttering under his breath as he strung up lights outside. I arrived with gifts wrapped in plain brown paper bags, books for cousins, gift cards tucked into neat envelopes. Emily arrived an hour late, swanning through the door in a sequined dress, clutching a handbag worth more than my monthly rent. "Sam," Mom announced loudly, "take a picture of your sister by the tree." "She looks beautiful." I raised the phone, forced a smile, and clicked. The photo was perfect. Emily beamed. Nobody asked about the contract I had just landed that week. Nobody noticed the exhaustion in my eyes. Later, after the cousins left, I overheard Emily whispering in the kitchen. "She could help me, you know. Just a small loan. She makes good money." Mom's voice was hushed but sharp. "I'll talk to her. She has to learn to support family." I stood frozen in the hallway, fists tight, nails carving crescents into my palms. That was the moment I realized they didn't see me as a daughter anymore. I was a resource, a walking wallet. Flashbacks swarmed me like insects. 16 handing Emily my babysitting money so she could buy a dress. 20 fixing her resume at midnight while she scrolled her phone. 24 covering her overdraft because Mom said, "Don't make a scene." Each memory small on its own. Together they carved a hollow in me I didn't know how to fill. That night, driving back to my apartment, I whispered it over and over like a mantra. "I'm done. I'm done." But blood ties have hooks. Every holiday, every barbecue, every birthday pulled me back into the same play. Emily the star, me the background light. The first crack came 1 week later. I was at my desk, papers stacked high, coffee gone cold. My phone buzzed. A text from Emily: "Need Netflix again." Password changed. I stared at the screen. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. For the first time in years, I typed back, "You don't pay for it. You don't use it." 3 dots blinked, then disappeared. Minutes later, my phone rang. Mom. "Sam, why are you being petty? It's just Netflix." I closed my eyes, heat rising in my chest. "It's not about Netflix," I said evenly. "Then what is it about? You're her sister. You're supposed to help." I didn't answer, because deep down, I knew this wasn't about passwords. It was about years of imbalance, of me carrying weight no one acknowledged. And I didn't know it yet, but that single text "no" was the first domino. In the weeks after Emily's obsession with business ideas grew louder, She dropped hints at dinners. Sam knows marketing, she'll help me. She smirked when cousins asked if we were working together and never corrected them. She was building a stage brick by brick, and I was the unwilling prop. The night before my 31st birthday, I sat on my balcony with a glass of cheap wine, the city humming below. My laptop glowed on the table, sticky notes scattered across its frame. I thought about how far I'd come, how I was no longer the girl sewing Emily's broken doll at the kitchen table. And then my phone buzzed. A group chat ping. My aunts, my cousins, my parents. Emily had posted a selfie, lips pouty, captioned, "Some people let money turn them cold." Guess success isn't for everyone. Hearts. Laughing emojis. Not one message defended me. Not one. I closed the app chest tight. That was when I understood this wasn't just sibling rivalry. This was a campaign. Emily had been painting me as the villain for years, positioning herself as the victim. I didn't know the full scope yet. I didn't know she'd soon pick up my laptop and drop it into the pool like it was nothing. But that night on the balcony, with the wine bitter on my tongue and the city lights blurring, I felt the ground shift beneath me. And somewhere inside, almost like a warning, I whispered, "The next time she tries, I won't just let it go." The summer after I turned 31, the cracks finally split wide open. It began quietly, like most storms do. One night, I curled up on the couch, ready to drown out the exhaustion of deadlines with an old sitcom, only to see the red warning, "Too many users on this account." My stomach tightened. I knew exactly who it was. Emily had been piggybacking on my accounts for years, Netflix, Spotify, Amazon Prime. She treated them like her birthright, like I owed her the entertainment of my paycheck. That night, I changed every password. My fingers trembled, but the feeling was clean, almost ceremonial. Each reset was like cutting another invisible string. The next morning, my phone lit up. "Why can't I log in?" "Did you change it? You're so petty, Sam." "It's just Netflix." Minutes later, Mom called. Her voice was sharp, rehearsed. "Sam, what is this? Emily says you locked her out of everything." "That's childish." I pinched the bridge of my nose, staring at the papers on my desk. "She doesn't pay for them. She doesn't get to use them. She's your sister. Stop making a scene over something so small." Small. That word again, as if years of thefts and betrayals could be boiled down to a password. By lunch, a group text from Mom appeared. "Family should stick together. Don't let something small tear us apart." Aunts and cousins chimed in with emojis and vague encouragements. Not one asked for my side. I stared at the glowing screen until the letters blurred, then flipped the phone face down. That night, Emily took her performance public. A photo appeared on Instagram, her sipping wine under fairy lights, makeup flawless. The caption, "Some people let money turn them cold." No names. The comments rolled in fast. "You're better off without toxic people." So true, Em. Even some of my own relatives liked the post. The smear campaign had begun. I told myself to ignore it, but ignoring a fire doesn't stop the smoke from suffocating you. The following week, I was in my office downtown when a coworker slid his phone across my desk. "Hey, isn't this your sister?" he asked. I froze. On his screen was Emily's LinkedIn profile, her so-called startup. And there it was, my company's logo plastered across her page, my photo tucked neatly under the title Senior Advisor. The blood drained from my face. "Where did you see this?" "She sent me a connection request," he said. "Said you two were working together." I excused myself, locked the bathroom door, and sank against the cool tile. My hands shook. She hadn't just borrowed my accounts, she had borrowed me. That night I texted her, "Take my name off your profile. Now." 3 dots pulsed, then disappeared. Her reply, "Don't be so dramatic. It makes me look credible. You should be flattered." Flattered. That was her word for identity theft. I didn't argue. I screenshotted everything, emailed it to myself, tucked it into a folder labeled Evidence. My silence was a blade sharpening in the dark. But Emily wasn't done. Days later, at a noisy cafe, a friend leaned across the table. "So, I hear you're backing Emily's new business. She's been bragging that you're her mentor." My fork clattered. What she said, you're the brains behind her launch. I smiled, tightly changed the subject, but inside, something cold spread through my chest. That night, I dug through Emily's social media, her half-abandoned blog. And there it was, a photo of her work setup. On the screen behind her, blurry but unmistakable, was my old company logo. Reckless, sloppy, perfect evidence. I filed it away. The folder thickened. Then came the envelope. It was a Wednesday evening, the air outside heavy with Texas heat. I opened my mailbox and found a letter from the IRS. At first, I thought it was routine paperwork. I sliced it open with my keys, scanning casually. Then the words burned through me. New business registration. Collins Creative LLC. My name listed under the employer identification number, my social security number. My knees buckled. I sat down hard on the apartment steps, the paper trembling in my hands. She hadn't just borrowed my Netflix. She hadn't just borrowed my face. She had stolen my identity. The cicadas screamed in the trees, the world tilting. And in that moment, I knew the silence I had carried for decades was about to shatter. I didn't call Emily right away. Rage would have given her power, and I was done feeding her. Instead, I dialed the only person I trusted, with this Alex Torres, my college friend who had become a lawyer. We met at a diner just off I-35, the kind with vinyl booths that stuck to your legs and a jukebox in the corner that hadn't worked since the 90s. The air smelled of grease and fried onions. I slid the IRS letter across the table. My coffee sat untouched. Alex read in silence, jaw tightening with every line. Finally, he looked up, eyes hard. "Sam, this isn't just her messing around. This is fraud. Real fraud. She used your social security number. That's a federal offense." The words sat heavy between us. Fraud. Federal. I stared at the chipped mug in my hands. So what do? Start documenting everything he said. Every text, every screenshot, every post. Don't confront her yet. Let her think you're silent. Silence unnerves people like her more than shouting ever could. I nodded, swallowing hard. That night, I started building what I would later call the binder. A black 3-inch binder with clear sleeves, each page a nail in the coffin. Screenshots of texts. Instagram posts where she bragged about making moves, with my sis behind the scenes. Her LinkedIn with my face listed as senior advisor. The IRS letter highlighted in yellow. Dates, names, details. Page by page, it grew heavier until it felt less like paper and more like a blade. Meanwhile, Emily only grew bolder. She blasted Instagram with photos captioned, "Hustle never sleeps" and "Building empires." At a family barbecue, I overheard her bragging to an Aunt Sam's been such a help. Honestly, I don't know what I'd do without her backing. The aunt smiled warmly. That's wonderful. You two always were close. I froze near the grill, the tongs burning in my hand. Emily caught my eye across the yard and smirked. She was daring me to say something to explode so she could play the victim. I didn't. Not yet. Because by then I had a plan. The breaking point came when Mr. Donovan, a family friend and local investor, called me one evening. His voice was cautious. "Sam, I just received a pitch deck from Emily. Your name's listed here. Before I make any decisions, I wanted to confirm, are you actually advising her company?" My blood ran cold. "Send me the deck." When it hit my inbox, I opened it on my laptop, the screen glow slicing through the dark of my apartment. There it was, in glossy fonts, advisors, Samantha Collins, marketing consultant. My LinkedIn link sat neatly underneath. It wasn't whispers anymore. It was public, concrete. I tucked it into the binder, page 87. And I didn't call Emily. Timing mattered more than fury. Days blurred into nights. At work, I led meetings, delivered pitches, smiled for clients. Inside, I was counting seconds toward a storm only I knew was coming. Meanwhile, Emily posted a story, a boomerang of champagne glasses clinking, captioned, "To the Empire." Her friends hyped her up with heart emojis. I sat in my apartment, the binder open across the table, the hum of the fridge filling the silence. I flipped through the pages one by one and realized this wasn't just about proving Emily wrong. This was about reclaiming my life. Still, there was one more piece missing. Proof of intent. proof she wasn't just sloppy but deliberate. It came sooner than I expected. An old client forwarded me an email. "Funny you should say this, Sam," he wrote, "but I thought you were working with a new startup. Someone named Emily reached out. She even attached your profile." Attached was the PDF. My photo, my name, my reputation, used to lure money into her scam. I sat back in my chair, the city buzzing beyond my window. If this were chess, Emily had just moved her queen directly into my line of fire. The binder snapped shut with a sound that made me shiver. 93 pages thick, airtight, undeniable. And that was the moment I decided it was time to strike. Not with rage, not with screams, but with silence sharp enough to cut. Because Emily thought she'd destroyed me the night she drowned my laptop. What she didn't know was that she'd just handed me the weapon I needed. The night I finally decided to strike felt different. The air outside my apartment was heavy with Texas heat cicadas buzzing like static in the trees, but inside my kitchen everything was still. Too still. I sat at the table, the binder open in front of me, its black spine stretching like a shadow across the wood. 93 pages of truth. 93 pieces of proof sharp enough to slice through every lie Emily had spun. For weeks, I had been adding to it, watching it grow thicker, heavier, until lifting it felt like lifting the weight of my whole childhood. My childhood of fixing dolls, covering overdrafts, swallowing my words. Now, every scar was pressed flat, in clear sleeves, cataloged and undeniable. I picked up the phone and called Alex. My voice was steady. "It's ready." There was no need for small talk. He understood. By the next day, Alex had drafted a cease and desist letter so sharp it made even me flinch when I read it. Legal language stripped of emotion, unauthorized use of name and likeness, identity fraud, defamation, immediate cessation required. Failure to comply will result in civil and potential criminal action. Reading those words out loud in my apartment, my pulse quickened. They sounded cold, final, like the strike of a judge's gavel. We sent it out in one sweep to Emily's email, to her so-called business partner, and for good measure to my parents' shared inbox. I imagined them opening it in their tidy living room, wine glasses balanced on the coffee table, their daughter's fraud laid out in black ink. And then I waited. The first response came not from Alex, not from my parents, but from Emily herself. My phone buzzed at midnight, her name flashing across the screen. "You're ruining everything. I thought you wanted me to succeed. You're my sister. How could you do this to me?" I didn't reply. I knew the cycle too well. Outrage, guilt, then manipulation. Sure enough, a few hours later, another text lit up. "When I make it big, you'll regret this." I muted the thread, poured myself a glass of wine, sat back in the quiet and let her words dissolve into the dark. That was step 1. Step 2 was exposure. I forwarded a scanned copy of the binder to every investor she had approached, attaching a short professional message. "This is to clarify that I have no involvement in this venture and do not endorse it in any way. No drama, no explanation, just facts." By the end of the week, I started to hear whispers. One investor pulled out, then another. Her so-called partner quietly deleted their joint posts online. On Emily's Instagram, the comments dried up. Where once there had been strings of emojis and cheers of "Go Girl, Empire Builder," now there was silence. Still, I wasn't finished. Step 3 was the family reveal. I printed a condensed version of the binder, 30 pages instead of 93, enough to tell the story without overwhelming them. I slipped it into a manila envelope, sealed it with tape, and stuck a post-it on the front in my neat, careful handwriting. "Thought you should see the whole story." No response needed. When I dropped it in the mailbox, I felt something uncoil in my chest. For once, I didn't care what they thought. They could call me cold. They could call me selfish. But they would see the truth in black and white, and there would be no way to twist it. 2 days passed. Silence. 3, 4. On the 5th night, my phone lit up. Mom's name. I stared at the screen until it went dark. Minutes later, a text, "We'll talk." I left it unread. Instead, I heard the story secondhand from my aunt, who couldn't resist playing messenger. She told me how Emily had come downstairs to find Dad waiting in the living room, the binder spread across the coffee table. How he went through it, page by page, his finger tapping each photo, each printout, each screenshot while Emily squirmed on the couch. She said it was all accidents, my aunt whispered over the phone. She said you were twisting things. But Richard, your father, he didn't budge. He told her to stop lying. He told her to pack her things. I sat in silence, the receiver pressed against my ear, my heart hammering. "And your mom?" I asked, finally. "She just sat there," my aunt said. "Didn't say a word. Not this time." I could almost see it. Emily's face crumpling, Mom biting her lip. Dad's voice steady and final. "Pack your things. Tonight." The words I had dreamed of hearing my entire life. The next morning, a cousin texted me a photo, Emily dragging 2 suitcases down the driveway. Eyeliner-smeared hair, unkempt. Mom stood in the doorway, arms crossed, not moving, to stop her. For the first time in years, Emily was truly on her own. But the strangest thing, I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't gloat. I didn't laugh. I sat on the edge of my bed, the morning light spilling across the floorboards, and just breathed. Because this wasn't about winning. It wasn't even about revenge. It was about boundaries. And Emily had finally hit the wall I had built. Still, I kept the binder close. Its black spine stood tall on my shelf, heavy and silent. A weapon I no longer needed to swing, but one I would never discard. Because proof doesn't just silence lies, it keeps them from ever rising again. And I knew Emily. Silence might crush her for now, but people like her don't fade easily. They adapt, they wait, they circle back. That's why I fortified everything. My accounts, my finances, my contracts. Every door she had ever slipped through, I sealed shut. If she ever came again, she wouldn't find the sister who once sewed her dolls or handed over passwords. She'd find Steele. The silence that followed was almost louder than the shouting I had always braced for. No group chat messages buzzing my phone at dawn. No guilt-laced voicemails from Mom. No cousins chiming in with their half-baked opinions. It was as if the entire family had taken a collective vow of quiet the moment Emily wheeled her suitcases out the door. For 4 nights, I barely slept. Not because I was anxious, but because I was listening for the absence. I kept the binder on my desk, its black spine a shadow under the lamplight pages I knew by heart. I didn't reread them. I didn't need to. They had branded themselves into me like scars. On the 5th morning, a cousin forwarded me a screenshot. Emily's Instagram, once a constant reel of rooftop selfies and champagne glasses, had gone dark. No captions, no smiling photos, no crowd of friends hyping her up in the comments. Silence, I thought, has its own weight, but silence also echoes. A week later, whispers drifted through the family network. Emily's partner had officially cut ties. Investors pulled out. People who once tagged her in stories stopped mentioning her name at all. Her friends didn't answer her calls. The girl who thrived on attention was suddenly radioactive. Part of me expected to feel joy, victory, the sweet burn of triumph after years of being cast as the cold one, the selfish one. But what I felt instead was something quieter, relief. One evening, I stopped at a cafe after work, the kind with Edison bulbs strung across the ceiling and the smell of burnt sugar in the air. I ordered a black coffee and slid into a window seat. Outside, the street shimmered under the neon glow of a taqueria sign. And then I saw her. Emily. Her hair was unbrushed, her hoodie wrinkled the same wrinkled one she'd worn at family barbecues. She wasn't scrolling her phone, wasn't performing for anyone. She just stared at the sidewalk, shoulders hunched like she was carrying the weight of something too heavy. For a second, I didn't see the manipulator. I saw the little girl clutching a broken doll, waiting for me to stitch it back together. Her eyes lifted, caught mine through the glass, and for the first time in years there was no challenge there. No smirk, just emptiness. I held her gaze for a moment, then turned back to my coffee. I didn't wave. I didn't smile. I let the moment pass, steam fading from my cup, because I realized then I wasn't interested in revenge anymore. Not the kind that screams across dinner tables or explodes in text threads. The real revenge had already happened. Emily had built her world on lies, and when I refused to hold it up, it collapsed under its own weight. Still, I kept the binder, not as a weapon to swing again, but as a reminder. It sat on my shelf, heavy and silent, a sentinel. Sometimes I'd glance at it before bed, the way veterans polish medals they no longer wear. Proof not just of betrayal, but of boundaries finally drawn. And yet part of me couldn't help but wonder, what if she tried again? People like Emily don't change overnight. They adapt. They look for cracks. They wait for the moment when you're tired enough to lower your guard. That's why I fortified everything. New passwords layered with security keys. Finances split into accounts no one could touch. Contracts at work locked tight with clauses that couldn't be twisted. Every door she had slipped through, I sealed shut. If she ever circled back, she wouldn't find the same sister who once lent her passwords, who once fixed her dolls and her resumes. She'd find steel. But as much as I tried to brace myself for the future, the silence in the present gnawed at me. Mom sent a holiday text, "Merry Christmas. Hope you're well." Stripped of guilt, short and polite. Dad's messages were even shorter. "Hope you're doing okay. No lectures about family, no sighs about letting it go." Just clipped phrases like an uneasy truce. The group chat had gone dead. The same relatives who once piled on me in defense of Emily now avoided my name altogether. When I passed a cousin in HEB one afternoon, she gave me a quick nod, then looked away as if afraid my presence might burn her tongue. It was almost funny. When I was painted as the villain, everyone had an opinion. Now that the truth lay in black and white, they couldn't type fast enough to stay silent. I sat with that silence often. In my apartment late at night, the glow of my new laptop, the one with encrypted drives and biometric login filling the room. I would sip tea, flip through work campaigns, and let the quiet press in on me like a weighted blanket. Sometimes it was comforting. Other times it felt like standing in the eye of a storm, waiting to see if the winds would circle back. Because I knew Emily. And silence never held her for long. 3 weeks passed before I saw her again. I was leaving a client meeting downtown, the glass towers catching the afternoon sun, when I spotted a figure hunched at the edge of the sidewalk. It took me a second to recognize her. Emily. Her hair was greasy knotted at the ends. She wore the same gray hoodie I'd seen in a dozen old family photos, sleeves stretched and pilled. The sequined dresses, the handbags, the glossy nails, they were gone. She looked smaller, like someone had turned the volume of her life down to a whisper. I froze. For a moment I expected her to spot me and put on the mask again, that smirk I knew better than my own reflection. But she didn't. She just stared at the ground headphones tangled in her lap shoulders, rounded as if she were trying to fold into herself. I kept walking. My heels clicked against the pavement, sharp and steady. I didn't look back. Because I had nothing left to give her, not pity, not anger, not recognition. That night, as I sat in my apartment, the city buzzing faintly outside my window, I opened the binder. Not to add anything new, not to sharpen my weapon again. Just to remind myself that none of this was an accident, that the downfall I'd witnessed on the sidewalk was built by her own hands. Inside, I kept meticulous records. Screenshots of texts, printouts of fraudulent filings, the pitch deck with my LinkedIn bold across the page. But it was the small things that struck me most. The Instagram captions, the casual smirks, the "just a laptop" line that still rang in my ears. Proof page after page that she had dared me to break and underestimated how silent revenge could be. Still, silence has its own price. My family lived in it now, and the weight of it was everywhere. Cousins who once filled group chats with emojis went quiet, their phones dark. Aunts who had once defended Emily stopped showing up at Sunday dinners. Even Mom's texts, once paragraphs of guilt, shrank to a single line. "Hope you're okay." Dad's messages were rarer still. Just one short clipped "proud of you." 3 words that hit harder than I expected. But I didn't respond. I couldn't. The silence had become part of my defense. Breaking it even for him felt dangerous. One evening, my aunt called. She whispered like we were trading secrets. "Things at your parents' house are tense," she said. "Your father," He went through that binder page by page with Emily, asked her to explain every screenshot. She tried the same lines, said it was all accidents, that you twisted it. But your mom didn't defend her this time. She just sat there. And Emily, I asked my voice flat. She left. 2 suitcases. No plan. She's been sleeping on couches. Some of her friends won't even answer her calls anymore. I thanked her, ended the call, and sat in the quiet of my kitchen. There was a time when hearing those words would have filled me with satisfaction, but what I felt instead was a strange heaviness. Not guilt, not after everything, but a recognition of what happens when someone finally runs out of bridges to burn. Still, I didn't waver, because if I'd learned anything, it was this: enabling her wasn't love. It was just fuel for the same fire that had nearly consumed me, and I wasn't going to hand her matches anymore. The weeks turned into months. I focused on work, pouring myself into campaigns that stretched across cities' brands with budgets that once felt unimaginable. My new laptop purred with efficiency, every file encrypted, every login sealed tight. My life felt fortified. But every now and then, the past cracked open. A coworker would mention a scam startup they'd heard about in town, and my chest would tighten. Or a cousin would post a vague status about family falling apart, and I'd know exactly who they meant. And then there were the nights when I caught myself staring at the binder too long, fingers itching to flip through the pages again. Not because I needed the evidence, but because part of me was still bracing, waiting. Because Emily might have been quiet, but I knew her. Quiet wasn't peace. Quiet was plotting. That thought lingered even stronger the day I got a new text, an unfamiliar number. Heard you cut your sister off. Cold move Sam, no name, no context, but I didn't need one. Word traveled. Stories warped. In someone else's version, I was the villain again. I stared at the message thumb hovering. Then I deleted it, because I didn't need to defend myself anymore. The proof sat on my shelf, and if anyone wanted to challenge me, all I had to do was open it. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling this wasn't over. Revenge rarely ends clean. It lingers, seeps, waits. And somewhere out there, I knew Emily was waiting too. 6 months slipped by in a blur of deadlines and new beginnings. In that time, my life shifted into something sturdier, something I could finally call mine. Work thrived. I signed a contract so lucrative the retainer alone eclipsed the $30,000 Emily once begged for. My office hummed with the low buzz of fluorescent lights and muted chatter, and for the first time I looked around and thought, this is my empire, built brick by brick, paid for by every sleepless night. I redecorated my apartment. The old sagging couch was replaced with a sleek gray sectional. I framed a panoramic shot of the Austin skyline and hung it above my desk. Even bought a rug soft enough that my bare feet sank into it like sand. I told myself these were just things, but deep down they were markers. Evidence that life didn't just go on after betrayal, it got better. And yet no matter how much I built, silence still pressed in. The family group chat remained dead. No more heart emojis, no more stick-together platitudes. Mom sent clipped holiday texts, Merry Christmas. Hope you're well. Dads were even shorter, proud of you. Just 3 words, but they landed harder than I ever expected. Still, there was a hollowness to it all. Silence might feel like peace at first, but the longer it stretched, the more it felt like a vacuum waiting to be filled. And that was when I saw her again. It was a Tuesday afternoon in February, the kind where rain slicked every surface and the city smelled of wet asphalt. I ducked out of a coffee shop cardboard cup warm in my hands when I nearly collided with someone under the dripping awning. Emily. She was almost unrecognizable. Her hair hung limp-streaked with dark roots under faded blonde dye. Her jeans sagged at the knees, fraying at the hems. She clutched a duffel bag against her chest like it was the only solid thing left in her life. For a heartbeat, we just stared. Rain hammered the street around us, the hiss filling the silence. Her eyes lifted, met mine. And for the first time in decades, I didn't see the smirk that had haunted me. I didn't see manipulation. I saw emptiness. Sam. Her voice cracked on my name. I said nothing. I just waited, breath clouding in the cold air. Her lips trembled like she was sifting through excuses but couldn't pick one. Finally, she whispered, "I didn't think it would end like this." The rain seemed to pause, the whole city holding its breath. I let the silence stretch. She shifted her weight, rain dripping off her sleeves, mascara smeared faintly under her eyes. "I just wanted to be you." That sentence cut deeper than any fraud, any lie, any manipulation. I wanted to be you, not my sister, not even herself. She wanted to wear my skin. I inhaled the damp air, sharp in my lungs. My voice came out low, steady, colder than I expected. "Emily, you destroyed yourself. Don't put that on me." Her eyes widened. For a moment, I braced for the old Emily, for the scream, the denial, the lashing out. But she didn't. She just stood there, shoulders slumping, and gave one small nod. And then she stepped back into the rain. I didn't follow. I didn't watch her disappear into the crowd of umbrellas. I turned, pushed open my car door, and let the storm swallow her. Back in my apartment, the windows fogged with condensation, I sat at the kitchen counter with my tea steaming in front of me. Behind me on the shelf, the binder stood like a silent sentinel. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. The image of her hollow eyes under the rain was enough proof that the war had already been decided. But even as I sipped one, thought wouldn't leave me. People like Emily don't vanish. They morph. They find cracks. They wait. And though the girl I saw on the sidewalk looked broken, I knew her too well to believe it was over. Somewhere out there, another version of Emily, polished, smiling, scheming, was waiting to rise again. That's why I built my life like a fortress. Passwords buried under layers of security. Finances sealed so tightly even I sometimes had to double-check them. Contracts rewritten with ironclad clauses. I had turned every door she once slipped through into a wall. If she ever circled back, she wouldn't find the sister who once stitched her dolls and lent her Netflix. She'd find steel. I set my tea down, staring at the condensation sliding down the window pane. Outside, the storm raged on, rain tapping against the glass like fingers. Somewhere in the city, Emily was wandering, carrying the ruins of the empire she'd tried to build on my name. They say revenge is sweet. But sitting there in my kitchen, tea cooling in my hands, I realized something truer. The sweetest revenge isn't screaming or exposing or even winning. It's walking away, letting them collapse under the weight of their own lies. Still, I couldn't shake the way she'd looked at me under that awning, eyes hollow, but flickering with something else. Something I recognized. Hunger. And that's when the truth hit me like the rain against the glass. This story wasn't over. Not yet. In the months after that rain-soaked encounter, life settled into something that almost felt like peace. My mornings began with the hum of my coffee maker, the city skyline painted in pale gold outside my window. My evenings ended with soft lamplight pooling over contracts I actually wanted to sign. Emily's absence echoed in strange ways. The group chat that once hummed with chaos remained silent. Holidays passed with clipped greetings and awkward phone calls instead of loud dinners. My parents, once so quick to defend her, seemed smaller in their silence, as though they too were realizing what had been lost by years of enabling. And me, I learned the quiet didn't have to be empty. It could be chosen. It could be protection. Sometimes, though, I still thought of her. The smirk at the pool. The shriek of my laptop hitting the water. The captioned selfies painting me as the cold one. And then the hollow eyes under that awning. I wondered which version of Emily was real. Maybe both. Maybe neither. Maybe she didn't know herself anymore. But wondering wasn't my job anymore. I used to believe protecting her was love, that excusing her was love, that swallowing my pain was love. But the truth, love without accountability isn't love at all. It's surrender. And I wasn't surrendering anymore. That was the real revenge, not in the binder on my shelf, not in the cease and desist letter that cut her empire off at the knees, not even in the moment Dad finally told her to pack her things. The real revenge was walking away, letting her taste the silence she'd once mocked me for keeping, letting her stumble under the weight of her own lies, because silence unnerves people who thrive on chaos. Proof destroys people who thrive on manipulation. And I had both. Now, when I glance at the binder on the shelf, I don't feel rage. I feel a reminder that boundaries aren't selfish, they're survival. That family doesn't excuse fraud, cruelty, or betrayal. That being the cold one was just another way of saying I refuse to be used. So if you've ever been the outsider in your own family, the one carrying the weight, while everyone else takes, then maybe you know this feeling too. That moment when you finally stop explaining, stop defending, stop begging to be seen. That moment when you simply walk away. And if you haven't yet, trust me, it's coming. Because every family has an Emily. Every family has a scapegoat. And every scapegoat has a breaking point. Mine came with a splash. And what they didn't know that day by the pool was this: they hadn't destroyed me. They'd just handed me the weapon I needed. So if you've ever felt that same sting of betrayal, if you've ever sat at a dinner table where the truth went unheard, if you've ever been painted as cold just for saying no, this story was for you. Tell me where you're watching from in the comments. Hit like if you've ever carried more than your share. And subscribe because trust me, this story isn't over. Not for me. And maybe not for Emily either.